So this evening, we're going to look at a Kabbalistic idea that is extremely powerful and very relevant. Like all Kabbalistic ideas, if we study it merely as mysticism, so then we're talking about another world. But when you take it personally, it's very much about this world. And the topic and the world that we're going to explore tonight is the world of Tohu, the world of chaos, and its untapped power, the power of chaos. I think something that a reflection on recent events in the world is that many of us, I can certainly speak for myself, had moments where we felt things may be slipping out of control. Certainly the world structure that we were familiar with, let's say 3 years ago, a certain point in the recent past, that structure fell apart, disappeared, was lost, and we were introduced to a whole new world where the structures that we depended upon, the institutions that we relied on, didn't know what was going on. And that was certainly a feeling of chaos, an experience of chaos. And that's unsettling because we like our life to be quite neat and organized and predictable. We like to know what's happening next, know what to expect. And so when you experience this chaotic, unexpected, out of control reality, we're not used to that, and we're pretty shocked. And so we're going to discover this evening that that chaotic reality is never far from the surface. The facade of organization, of predictability, of comfortability that we have, it's very thin. And beneath it, there is a big, bubbling, chaotic reality that is waiting to surface at any time. And when it does, we don't know what to do. We really lose it very quickly, unless we learn to channel that power, the untapped power of chaos. That's what we're going to explore this evening. And the way we're going to do it is by basing it on texts, on Torah and Kabbalistic texts, to understand the world of Tohu, the world of chaos. As always, questions will be welcome at the end. You're welcome to write them in the chat during the course of the class. And at the end, we'll go through all questions. You can write them privately or publicly. And you can also ask questions at the end if you'd like to unmute yourself at the end. But in the meantime, please keep yourself muted till we get there. So let's begin. Here is a quote from the Torah, the book of Genesis, a story about the beginnings of the Jewish family. In its third generation, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob was the third. And we're going to hear about the birth of Jacob and his twin brother Esau. The Torah says the following, that, and Isaac prayed to the Lord opposite his wife because she was barren. And the Lord accepted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So Isaac and Rebekah had been married for several years without being blessed with children. They pray, and their prayers answered. Rebekah conceives. And the children struggled within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I like this? And she went to inquire of the Lord. She had some struggle within her during her pregnancy. She felt this upheaval, not knowing what it was. She went to seek the Lord, to ask God what's going on. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 kingdoms will separate from your innards. And one kingdom will become mightier than the other kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. So she receives this prophecy that she's actually got 2 nations within her, 2 kingdoms, and the struggle within her is the struggle between these 2 kingdoms. One will become mightier than the other kingdom. Only one will be mighty at any one time, and the elder will serve the younger. This is the prophecy that she receives. Continues the Torah, and the days to give birth were completed. And behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first one emerged ruddy, red-like. He was completely like a coat of hair, and they named him Esau. And afterwards, his brother emerged, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel, and he named him Jacob. So the first one's called Esau, born red and covered with a coat of hair. The second one is called Jacob because he was grasping the heel of his older twin brother Esau. Jacob comes from the word akev, meaning a heel. And the Torah continues and tells us that the youth grew up, and Esau was a man who understood hunting, a man of the field, whereas Jacob was an innocent man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because game was in his mouth, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So we see that they split in two different directions. That Esau was a man who is a hunter, a man of the field, a more outdoor person, and with a bit of aggression. Whereas Jacob was an innocent, soft, gentle type who sat in the tent, more studious, reflective type of person, a gentle, softer one. As we saw from the prophecy that Rebekah received when she was pregnant, that the struggle inside of her was because you got two very different nations who are going in two very different directions, and they're going to struggle. Only one can be master at any one time. Isaac loved Esau because the game was in his mouth. There was something about Esau that Isaac preferred. He was a hunter, so he brought game home. But knowing Isaac being a more holy and spiritual type, there must have been something he saw in Esau that Rebekah didn't agree with. Rebekah, who had received the prophecy, knew that the younger will be dominant. The older will serve the younger. So she had a special love for Jacob. Now, there's a lot in this story, and we can go into the family dynamics here of twin brothers who are very different. We can go into the psychological impact of the father favoring one and the mother favoring the other. Did they know this? Were they aware of it or not? These are all fascinating discussions. But for the purposes of our discussion, we're going to look into the Kabbalistic interpretation of this relationship of Jacob and Esau, the two twins. Because the way the Kabbalah reads every Torah story is at once it happened. That's one element. It's a story that happened. These are our forefathers. This is the family, the Jewish people. But these stories are not recorded merely as history. They're recorded because there is spiritual messages behind every single detail here. That the characters of the Torah, apart from being literal people who lived, are also spiritual symbols who mean something for us. And so the Kabbalist would extract from these stories mystical intimations and then apply it in a personal and spiritual way. So what's the story here of Jacob and Esau, twin brothers, Esau older, Jacob younger, Esau rough, red, and hairy, a hunter, Jacob gentle, soft, holding on to the heel of Esau, chasing him, as it were, seeming to want to be first, but being a more soft and innocent type. And this constant struggle between them, and the prophecy that in the end, the older will serve the younger. What's behind this? So to try and unravel some of this from a Kabbalistic perspective, we're going to look at a couple of sources. The first one is the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of the Adi, in his great work, Torah Ur. Torah Ur is a collection of his talks and discourses based on the Parasha of the week, the Torah readings, where he would extrapolate the inner meaning behind them. And he says the following fascinating words. It is known, and by the way, whenever the Kabbalists say it is known, we're going to hear something that we didn't know. It is known means it's known if you know. And if you don't, you're going to hear it now. It is known that Jacob's soul was sourced in the world of Tikkun, which literally means fixing. And Esau is sourced in the world of Tohu, chaos. The lights of Tohu are extremely intense and could not be contained in the vessels, so they hovered above, leaving the vessels to smash and fall below. That's why Esau down here was wicked. But from the perspective of his source in Tohu, the lights of Tohu are far greater than the lights of Tikkun. So here, what is the Alter Rebbe suggesting here? He's telling us the spiritual source of Jacob and Esau and their souls. The difference between them was not just some genetic difference or something to do with their upbringing. It was to do with their soul. Jacob's soul came from the world of Tikkun. Esau's soul came from the world of Tohu. Tikkun and Tohu are the two important words that we're going to be analyzing tonight, because what the Alter Rebbe here is referring to is two stages of creation, two different spiritual sources. Tikkun, fixing, and Tohu, chaos. Now here he gives us a little bit of insight into this, that the light of Tohu, the spiritual world of Tohu, of chaos, is an extremely high and intense light. The energy of Tohu is extremely high and intense, so much so that it couldn't be contained in the vessels, he says, which is Kabbalistic terminology we're going to look at closer soon. So therefore, the light was too much. The light couldn't be contained in the world of Tohu, the spiritual realm of Tohu, which caused a smashing, an explosion, where the vessels fell below. So there's all we know from this, just reading this, is that there's a spiritual realm called the world of Tohu, the world of chaos, that is an extremely powerful, potent spiritual source. So potent, the light, the energy, the holiness of that world was too much, could not be contained, and caused some type of shattering of the vessels, the containers in that spiritual world, and a descent, a falling of energy. And so Rabbi Shneur Zalman here, the Alter Rebbe, is suggesting that Esau's soul came from that place, an extremely high energetic place. His rough external presentation was as a result of his very high soul. But that soul came from a place that was high, so high that it exploded. There's too much light, too much energy. And the explosion caused a fall, a descent. So Esau down here in this world was not a very nice person. He was a rough, violent person, because he was the result of falling from a very high level. Now, that high level is even higher than the world of Tikkun. The world of Tikkun, fixing, is the world where the lights are not so intense, where the energy is not so intense. It's a more calm, more contained light, a light that can be organized, fixed, corrected. Jacob came from that world. His soul came from the world of Tikkun, the world of correction, of fixing, which is a much more pleasant source, a calmer source of a soul. But it's not as high. It's not as high as Esau, who came from the world of Tohu. And so what the Alter Rebbe has introduced is the idea that there are two types of souls. There are Tohu souls and Tikkun souls. A Tohu soul is somebody who has a huge amount of energy and light, but it's not very well contained. And therefore, it can easily be corrupted. It can be misdirected. Whereas a Tikkun soul is somebody who will behave much better, has it much more together, is much more organized in their expression, much more deliberate and directed and palatable in their ways. But there's less energy there, there's less light there, there's less power in that person. What's better? Well, down here in this world, Tikkun is better than Tohu. Jacob was a righteous person and Esau was not. So there's no question that down here in this world, Jacob is greater than Esau. But in their source, in their energy, where they come from, Esau comes from a higher place than Jacob. He comes from the world of chaos, which is actually higher than the world of fixing. And therefore, we find that throughout the Torah, there's a fascinating relationship, a wrestle and a struggle between these two, Jacob and Esau, a love-hate relationship in a way, where they're constantly either at loggerheads with each other or trying to make amends with each other. If you look through the Torah, you'll see that Jacob and Esau had several different interactions and times. We know that Jacob bought the birthright from Esau, saying that Esau, even though you're born first, because you come from a higher source, but down here in this world, you're not living up to that higher source. And Esau had no problem selling his birthright to Jacob because he didn't see a value in it. He was a fallen soul. He didn't see the value in being the firstborn, which has more spiritual obligations. The blessing that their father Isaac wanted to give to Esau, because Isaac knew Esau's soul, Esau's source, he wanted to bless him. But Rebekah knew that even though his soul was very lofty, he wasn't living up to that soul. And so she organized that Jacob should receive the blessing. Because down here in this world, tikkun, fixing, correcting, the power of Jacob has to be dominant to fix Esau, the broken soul who came from the higher source. And there's a struggle between them, there's a wrestle between them. Eventually, after years of being apart and basically being in a state where they weren't on talking terms, Jacob and Esau do meet and embrace at the end. Because there's a moment where Esau recognizes that for him to reach his potential, he needs help from Jacob. For chaos to reach where it can actually be a force for positivity, it needs the organized experience, the direction of tikkun. We're going to explore this from several different angles and try and understand a little bit better what this all means, the tikkun and the tohu relationship. The idea, the first real source of this idea is straight out of the Torah, right at the beginning. If you look at the book of Genesis, right at the beginning of creation, in the beginning of God's creation of the heavens and earth, these are the first verses of the Torah. The second verse says, now the earth was astonishingly empty, which in Hebrew is tohu vavohu, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. The word tohu is in the second verse of the Torah. And then the third verse says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. The Kabbalists plumbed the depth of these verses, and we could spend hours, literally hours, days, just on these three verses, trying to understand what their real depth mean. Every single word here has huge meaning. And the Kabbalists have pages and pages of commentary on the first verses of the Torah. But one idea that they extrapolated from here is that this is not talking just about the beginning of creation when earth already was. This is actually talking about before earth was. Before the physical world was created, God first created Tohu, a chaotic world. And only after that, he created a world of light, the world of Tikkun. So the Kabbalists, particularly the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who we'll see a quote from soon, extrapolated the idea that in the process of creation, God started with a chaotic expression of divine energy. This chaotic energy was an expression of divine light, of divine life force, but it was in a chaotic fashion, meaning that the various powers of God did not work in tandem. They clashed with each other, causing an explosion and a falling of energy. Then a second version was needed. A second attempt of creation was needed, the world of Tikkun, where the same energies are a bit more muted slightly less energetic, so they should be able to work together in tandem, in a system. And the world of Tikkun appeared. If we look at the words of the Arizal himself, this is from the book Eitz Chaim, one of the foundational works of the Arizal's teachings, where he describes it in these words: since the lights of Tohu were so intense and powerful, the vessels did not have the power to contain them, and the vessels died, meaning to say they fell below. The way it's written and the way it's described, it sounds like a mistake happened, which is, of course, ridiculous to say, that God is creating the world, and in creating the world, he made one attempt by expressing his light, but it didn't work out. There was an explosion, they died, these energies. And so he had a second attempt where he did things more organized and a little bit less energetic, a little bit less powerful. The way it sounds like, it was like, we have to do plan B. Plan A didn't work, so we'll do plan B. But the Kabbalists explained, of course, that's not the case. This was a very intentional act. God created a world that didn't work. He created a mess of chaos that caused a smash, a collision. And there was a mess, there was debris falling down, as it were. And then he created the power to correct, to organize, to fix that. The world of Tohu, of chaos, that was never going to work. And the world of Tikkun, that will work. This was not a mistake. It was intentional. God created the universe in a way that it should be based on the idea of fixing something that went wrong. It wasn't mistaken that it went wrong. God did it intentionally. But what that created is a world where it's all about fixing mistakes. He created an opportunity for us, for we human beings, who inevitably will make mistakes, that we're here to fix those mistakes. Mistakes are okay as long as you fix it. And if you do fix it, you'll find a deeper light than if you never would have made the mistake. The lights of Tohu, the energy of Tohu, of chaos, of that chaotic world that preceded creation, are the highest lights coming from the highest place. But they're so high, they couldn't come down here in our world, not in a normal fashion. So all we have in this world from Tohu is the explosion, the mess that was created. But if we live a life of tikkun, of correcting, of fixing, of improving, of working, of refining, so then living in this world that has the fragments of Tohu in it, we will pick up those fragments and experience the light of Tohu in the world of Tikkun. This is the message behind this, that the Arizal Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, he lived in the 1500s in the Holy Land of Israel. And in his teachings, there's a huge amount of discussion about this, what's called the Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels of Tohu. This idea was something that he perceived by reading the words of the Torah, and assumedly from his higher prophetic power, he perceived that this is the way reality is. It's based on a smashing, a crash, an explosion, a falling, and we're here to fix it. There was the Tohu before us, and now we're in the Tikkun, the correcting of the chaos. But it's important to note that even though the way these ideas are expressed is in a past tense, there was the world of Tohu, the world of chaos, chaotic energy that preceded Tikkun, and then after that came Tikkun to fix it. It's in that order. That's the way it's expressed, and that's the way we understand things in a linear fashion of time. But these exist simultaneously as well. It's not that Tohu was and now it's Tikkun. There's a level of Tohu and there's a level of Tikkun. Tohu precedes Tikkun. It comes higher. It's from a higher place than Tikkun, but it's not gone. Tohu is not finished. Tohu is still very much here. The world of Tohu, the world of chaos, is absolutely here with us. It's not once upon a time and now things are Tikkun. It's that we inhabit Tikkun, but Tohu is always there in the background as well, in the wings. And sometimes not so much in the wings. Sometimes Tohu is center stage. To understand this, one of the metaphors used to understand Tohu and Tikkun, these two stages of creation, is the understanding of the stages of human being. We generally speaking go from childhood to adulthood. We are born relatively young, and we don't stay young, we become older. And at least for most people, that is a process that's inevitable, that you don't stay a child. You become, at some stage, an adult. The childlike state is very much a Tohu state. The adult, mature state is a Tikkun state. Meaning, for a child lives in the world of extremes. Whatever is happening at the moment is totally happening, and they're completely in it. If they are happy all the way. Joyous, happy, like top of the world, everything is fantastic and great. If the child is not happy, then it is the end of the world. They're in tears. Nothing's good. It's the worst thing in the world. Whatever a child is experiencing, they're experiencing it to the extreme, to the exclusion of all else, without any sense of perspective, of rationale, of looking at the big picture. I'm in it, and that's it. So those who have children in their life will know that certain things, like bedtime, for example, when it's time for bed, if child does not want to go to bed, they say no. And I dig the heels in. I'm not going to bed. I'm never going to bed. I never sleep. I don't sleep. I'm not doing it. And any excuse or anything that they refuse to do it. And if you cajole them and push them and say, no, it's time for bed, they'll fight and run away. A little kid, you might have to physically lift them up and say, come on, we've got to go to bed. And they'll kick and scream. It's the worst thing in the world. And I hate you. You're the worst father in the world. And they mean it. At that moment, they mean it. 5 minutes later, they might snap out of it. And you're the best father in the world. And that's fine. That's totally fine, because whatever the kid is experiencing, they're it completely and totally. They're completely in it in that moment. If an adult would behave that way, if a grown person, when you suggested to them, okay, I think it's time to go, said, no, I'm not going, and they threw a tantrum, I hate you. An adult would behave that way. We would say, what got into you? What's going on here? We'd be in total shock. For a child to behave that way, it's quite normal. Because a child does not have perspective. They have extreme emotion. As they grow older, as you become mature, you gain perspective, hopefully. And when somebody says something that you disagree with or you don't want, or they ask you to do something that you're not in the mood of, so that doesn't mean you have to fly off the handle. You don't have to scream back at them. You could discuss it. You could say calmly, I don't think I'd like to do that right now. You might even say to yourself, I don't want to do it, but they have a point. It is time to go, so I should go. And you could even behave in a way that you don't feel like. That's maturity. Maturity is being able to balance various different moods, different opinions, different realities and situations, and saying, well, on the one hand this, but on the other hand that. And so just because I disagree with what you said doesn't mean I hate you. A child can't see that perspective. A child is totally in what they're in. And therefore, a child is chaotic. Childhood is by definition chaotic. There is chaos. Children make mess. They break things. They spill things. They get dirty. it's a part of their reality, because everything they do with extreme, without consideration for any bigger picture or any other people or issues. They totally, if they're eating their chocolate mousse, they're in it completely and it's all over them. An adult may want to eat that way, but there's a certain constraint that an adult has, that you don't put your face in the chocolate mousse. You eat it with your spoon slowly. You don't shove it onto your face. I'm generalizing, of course. Some adults might eat that way. This is Tohu and Tikkun. The chaos of childhood is Tohu. The containment of adulthood is Tikkun. First, the energies have to be expressed and developed. And then those energies have to be curtailed and work together. In creation, first God expressed all these energies. Each one had to be independent, had to be expressed on its own to develop as a self. But when you're developing a self, that's at the expense of another self. And so there's a clash. Then there has to be where those various energies are curtailed and work in harmony together. And that's maturity, that's adulthood, that's tikkun. The role of a parent, a teacher, a guide, an adult in a child's life is to bring tikkun to their tohu, to bring order, fixing, correcting, working together to the chaotic expression of a child. The challenge is that even though a mature person is tikkun, it's only the immature little people that are tohu. But in actual fact, under the surface, the mature person also has tohu. There's also tohu inside of us. There's a chaotic force inside of a mature person as well. The maturity is a veil, a facade that protects and directs and holds back the chaotic forces inside. But the chaotic forces are totally there. They haven't gone away. They're part of you in your adulthood as well. You also have a childlike, immature energy in you. And when you're around the chaos of a child, it sometimes can ignite in you the chaotic in you. And sometimes an adult does not behave very maturely with the child. The child gets angry and the adult gets angry as well. And it becomes a clash. The childlike stubbornness comes out in an adult because when we're around chaos, it arouses our chaos as well. Because that tikkun is the external expression, but deep down there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of tohu there as well. It hasn't gone away. It's always here. It's always beneath the surface. And that's why we do see that adults sometimes go a bit wild, sometimes lose it. That controlled, mature attitude can sometimes be lost as a result of traffic or overtiredness or pushing the wrong button. And sometimes suddenly this chaotic energy comes out in the form of a temper, losing control, kicking and screaming. It's always there under the surface. The same is true culturally, that the society that we live in is held together by a very vulnerable series of understandings, of conventions, of rules, of etiquette, of politeness, where we're supposed to behave in a certain way in order to be able to live together. We can't live together if each of us just does whatever we want. That's anarchy. We have to have certain rules of society so we can work together. But those rules are quite delicate. They only work as long as people keep them. When you don't take those rules seriously, then that delicate fabric of society falls apart very quickly and we retreat into anarchy. Think of a roundabout, a traffic roundabout at an intersection. A roundabout's an incredible thing. I'm driving that way, and that's the way I want to go. Somebody else is driving that way, and they want to go there. And so we reach a roundabout, and without anyone telling us anything, without any police standing there directing us, without any type of barrier stopping us, one person stops and lets the other person go. Why? Because they are to my right, and the person on the right has right of way. And so I stop and let them go. But I want to go that way. Why am I stopping? I'm in a rush. I don't know who they are, but I stop for them. Why? Because there is the rule that when you come to a roundabout, you stop and let them go. That's incredible. That's amazing that people behave that way. People actually do that. Admittedly, not everyone does. Some people don't. But enough people do to make it safe enough that I know that when I reach the roundabout, if it's my turn, I can go. And if it's their turn, they can go. But that only works because I trust that they are going to listen to the rule, and they trust that I'm going to listen to the rule. In certain societies, that works. There are some societies that does not work. You need a red light. If there's not a red light, I'm going. And in some societies, red light doesn't work either. Even with a red light, I'm still going because I've got to go. It just depends how much tikkun and how much tohu you have. How much order is there? How much maturity, how much sensitivity to the other is there in a society? Or how much just chaotic, I'm here and I'm doing what I want? And that will apply to every area of our life. There's the tikkun system that holds back the tohu chaos from taking over and going out of control. This is at the basis of creation. God created the world with tohu, a chaotic energy, which chaos left on its own causes collision, smashing at the roundabout and in the primordial lights of creation. Tikkun gives order, gives healing, cooperation, working together, space for other, holding back that chaotic energy. So if we look, we'll see that Tohu and Tikkun are the two sources of various different realities in our world. And here's just a list of a few examples. Tohu is the source of chaos. That's what the word means. Tikkun is the source of order. Tohu is the source of animals. Animals are tohu. They are chaotic. They are instinctive. They're powerful and strong. An animal does what it does, and that's all. An animal has its nature that it was created with, and that's what it does. Humans are from Tikkun. Humans are multifaceted. Every person, every human being, every single one of us have so many aspects to our life, so many things that we can juggle at once, so many personas that we have, so many hats that we wear. An animal doesn't do that. An animal has its instinct of survival, of protection, of propagation. It does what it does, and that's it. From when it's born till when it dies. Every generation the same. Whereas humans, we in one day go through so many different states of being, moods, and powers that we can express. We can change from one extreme to another. That's tikkun, which is multifaceted, but it's not nearly as energetic and as powerful as the raw power of an animal. So too, emotions. Emotions are from Tohu. Intellect is from Tikkun. Our emotions, like we spoke about the child, an adult's emotions also, an emotion is extreme. The emotion I'm feeling now is the entire world. If I'm feeling down and sad now, everything's bad. The world is bad and nothing can get me out of it. If somebody says to me, cheer up, that makes it even worse. On the other hand, if things are up and I'm feeling positive, so then everything's good. At that moment, everything's good. I can't even remember how it felt when it was bad. An emotion is so singular, but it's chaotic. It's not organized. It has no perspective. It has no limitations. Emotions don't come neatly at this time and leave at that time. Intellect, on the other hand, is the power to organize, to arrange, to classify, to define, to give everything its place. So Tohu is the source of anarchy, chaos and anarchy. Everyone does their own thing. Tikkun is where civilization comes from. An organized society working together for a common good. Tohu is stubborn. That this is what I want and I'm not budging from it. This is right and that's it. Or single-mindedness. The way I see it is the right way, and you're wrong. That's a Tohu state to be in. Whereas Tikkun is balanced and harmonious. That I can work with you. I have an opinion, you have an opinion. We can work together. I'm a bit right, you're a bit right. So together we can come up with something greater. We can work together. Childhood versus adulthood. Childhood is Tohu, is the Tohu time of life, when emotions are going to extremes. Whereas adulthood is the Tikkun, held back, refined time of life, maturity. Extremism is Tohu. An extremist, where there is one issue that they believe in, and they dedicate themselves to that one issue. And there's no gray area. It's black or white. That's a Tohu state. Whereas nuance, subtlety, the ability to see the relative power of one thing over another, and the two sides of a story, that's a Tikkun state of mind. And therefore, within each one of us, we have an animal soul from Tohu and a divine soul from Tikkun. We have a part of ourself, of our persona, which is the animalistic soul. The Kabbalists called it the nefesh abahamis, the animal soul within the human being. It's our instinctive self that is just there for me, just looking out for myself. It's the source of my urges, my natural urges. It's the source of my lower instincts and lower nature, my physical, materialistic, and hedonistic side. That's complete Tohu. It's about me and doesn't care about anything else, has no perspective. It's wild, the wild side of me. But my divine soul is the elevated, refined, holy part of me. That's my Tikkun side, the side that is looking for something outside and beyond myself, not stuck in myself. And both of them are in me. Tohu and Tikkun are in me. It's not that I used to be a child and now I'm an adult. It's that I have the child in me now that is being held at bay by my adult self, hopefully, most of the time. But it can always surface. As soon as that adult maturity is shaken, is challenged, is pushed to its limit, suddenly this childlike wildness can come out. And that is not always bad. That while Tohu is a broken state of being, it's chaotic, whereas Tikkun is fixed and organized, there's an element of Tohu that it is higher than Tikkun. Tohu came from a higher source. There is greater light, greater energy, greater power in Tohu than in Tikkun. Tikkun is the way to express, but Tohu is the energy you want to tap into. Tohu is not bad. It's just fallen. It needs to be corrected. Tikkun comes and corrects Tohu. Our mature self can come and direct our childlike self to actually express itself positively. It's not bad to channel that in a child if Tikkun directs where it's appropriate. So if we analyze, if we dig under the Tohu and Tikkun, we'll see that the obvious advantages are to Tikkun, but the deeper advantages are in Tohu. If we look here, we see that you have a Tohu side and you have a Tikkun side. And each one of those sides of you has strengths and weaknesses. And they're exactly corresponding to each other. The weaknesses in your Tohu are the strengths in your Tikkun. And in fact, the weaknesses of your Tohu side are the flip side of the strengths that Tohu itself has. There are weaknesses in your Tikkun side, which are the flip side of the strengths of your Tikkun side. Let's have a look. Look at your Tohu side. So it's got certain weaknesses. It's wild, out of control. It's the side of you that snaps, that says things that you didn't think before speaking and gets you in a lot of trouble, can cause you to say words that are extremely hurtful and you didn't really mean, causes you to steamroll and not give any space to another. So you're wild, unsociable. It's the part of you that has no consideration or connection to the other, is completely self-absorbed with just your way of seeing things. Can't see beyond your perspective. And is therefore pushy, that anyone else just needs to get out of the way of what I need and what I want and what I think is right. That's your Tohu side, the wild and chaotic side of your personality. Look on your Tikkun side, the exact opposite of the strengths of your Tikkun side. The strengths of your Tikkun side is you're strategic, meaning that you think things through, you have a plan, and you become organized. Not wild and erratic, but organized and focused in a strategic way. You are able to be considerate of others as opposed to being unsociable and disconnected. You have in mind the needs of other people. You're sensitive to their feelings. You're aware of their place in the world, and you give it credence and honor. Just like you honor yourself, you honor another. That's your Tikkun side, the ability to work with others, to fix and correct relationships, to elevate. And that's your humble side. the humble side that says that even though I have an opinion, I can learn from others. I can listen to somebody else and they have just as much to say and maybe more. That's your humble side. The strengths of your Tikkun side are the exact opposite of the weaknesses of your Tohu side. Strategic and not wild, considerate and not unsociable, humble and not pushy. But at the same time, your Tohu side has certain strengths, a certain power that Tikkun cannot compete with. Your Tohu side is energetic. It's got energy, it's got momentum. It's like the animal drive that is so powerful, so overwhelming. It's a force to reckon with. Whereas your Tikkun side is a bit calm. It's not so energetic because it's not so self-assertive. It's a little bit lukewarm, watered down. Your Tohu side is individualistic. There's something that only you can bring to the world in the Tohu world. The Tohu element of you is about you asserting yourself. Whereas your Tikkun side is much more conventional, is much more interacts with the world around you, compromises. So it's not quite as individualistic. Your Tohu side is determined. It will not budge. It's going to go to the end. Whereas your Tikkun side is contained. It holds itself back. And so if you look at these four squares, each one is parallel to the one next to it and the one above it and below it. The weaknesses of your Tohu side, your wild, unsociable, and pushy self, is the flip side of the strengths of your Tohu side, your energetic, individualistic, and determined self. It's the same thing. The weaknesses of your Tikkun side, your conventionalness, conformity, your lukewarmness, not so energetic, your containedness, you're held back, not pushing till the end. Well, that's the flip side of your strategic, considerate, and humble self. It's because you think a bit too much and you plan a bit too much that you're not so spontaneous and original. Because you're considerate, so you're not so individualistic and a bit more conventional. Your humility holds you back to be contained. The strengths are the flip side of the weaknesses, and the weaknesses are the flip side of the strengths on both sides. And so what we really want is we really want to channel the powers of our Tohu side to be expressed in a way of Tikkun. We want the energy of Tohu to be directed into the system of Tikkun. We want the best of both worlds. And this, indeed, is an ideal that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that we can do. It was 1991, where he said the words, "Do all you can in a way of lights of Tohu in vessels of Tikkun to bring Mashiach immediately." It's known that the Rebbe was very, very intent on the world reaching its ultimate purpose, which is Mashiach, the Messiah coming. What is Mashiach? What does it mean? It's where the highest spiritual energies can be expressed in the lowest physical world. That we can take the energies, the lights of Tohu, and express them in the vessels of Tikkun. That this world should not be transformed by force, but it should, in a systematic way, be transformed, which means that our soul has a power in it that is higher than both Tohu and Tikkun. Our soul is not just defined by Tohu and Tikkun, but it actually is a piece of God himself, the source of Tohu and Tikkun. And so when you're connected to your divine source, to God himself, the essence of the soul, you can bring together both energies. When your spirituality is directed in a way that is divine, that you can bring the two together. You see, Tohu is the chaotic, animalistic energy that is at the core of creation. Tikkun is the systematic, organized, limited expression of light that is on the surface of creation. But God is the source of both. And so the idea, the Rebbe expressed, the idea of Torah is taking divine light from the world of Tohu and bringing it in an organized lifestyle in the world of Tikkun. That you have to live in a way that is totally fitting with the world. Keep the mores and customs and etiquette of this world. Be a normal person. But that normality is the external surface. Internally, you're not normal. You've got a fire in your soul. You've got a chaotic energy building up inside of you. You have unbelievable individualism. There's something individual about you, a gift that only you have to the world that doesn't fit into anything else. There are ideas and powers and expressions and abilities that you have to bring to the world that are totally original, that don't fit into anything. So you have to try and tap into that at the same time as being a totally normal person. You see, it's always tempting to either be Tohu or Tikkun, that either I'm a Tohu type or a Tikkun type. Maybe I'm a Tohu type, a bit of an anarchist, a nonconformist, and I want to just negate the entire world and live a life off the grid. To be just my Tohu self. That's one way of living. The other way is to be a Tikkun person, to be just clean cut, average, like everybody else. Don't shake any boats. Don't do anything unusual. Just fit in and blend in with the crowd. And probably each one of us tend one way or the other. We're a bit Tohu type or a bit Tikkun type. We've all got both, but we're a bit this way, a bit that way. We're the childlike Tohu personality that never grows up, or we're the contained Tikkun type that never lets the hair down. The Rebbe said, we've got to take the light of Tohu and bring it in the vessels of Tikkun. Take that childlike, chaotic, pure emotion and express it in a way that's respectful. You can have a passionate discussion that's respectful. So express your passions and express it in a passionate way, but a respectful way. A Tohu energy that has the Tikkun presentation. You want to express a deep individualistic spirituality, that's fine. But that doesn't have to be in a way that negates the world or offends other people. You can do it in a way that is very internal, that you take the Tohu energy inside of you, and you do it in a way that can be quite normal. And this is ultimately what will bring Mashiach. Mashiach is where we have the highest spiritual energy, that deep individualism, and it's totally a part of this world. It's not contradictory to this world at all. And this is hinted at in the episode in the Torah where Jacob and Esau the last time they saw each other, embraced. After many years of being apart, they finally faced each other. And Jacob was not sure if Esau would wage war against him or not. And in the end, he embraced. And the Torah records it, that Esau ran towards him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. They wept about all those years where they were separated, where Jacob and Esau, Tohu and Tikkun, these two energies that seem so apart, but they can actually work together. And after this embrace, Esau said to Jacob, okay, let's travel together. And Jacob said to Esau, not yet. We've embraced, but hasn't yet come the time when we can work together. That will be at the end of times. And so this, I believe, is the time in history when the chaotic energy can be brought down into an orderly tikkun expression. This is the time that Jacob and Esau saw in their future, that we have huge energy today. We have a huge amount of spiritual connection today, maybe more than ever before. And we also have the vessels, the containers, greater than ever before. We have the means to express it more than ever. And so if we see a world that is teetering towards chaos, that just needs to be channeled. That chaotic energy needs to be channeled. If it's directed correctly with a divine purpose, so then we'll fulfill the embrace of Jacob and Esau, of Tohu and Tikkun, and that will be the coming of Mashiach. Amen. Okay, I'm going to go now to the questions that were put into the chat. You're welcome to put any others in. Take any other questions as well. So let's have a look. Is there any connection between the restraint of Gevura to Tikkun and the unrestrained Chesed to Tohu? So yes, there is. Chesed and Gevura, the two emotional faculties. Chesed, usually translated as kindness and expressiveness. Gevura as restraint or discipline. So yes, there is a connection between Tohu, Tikkun, Chesed, and Gevura. There's a Kabbalistic work called Sefer HaTmuna, and there it says that the world that we live in, the world of Tikkun, was preceded by another world called the world of Tohu. The way he describes it is not in those words. He says that there was a Chesed world that preceded our world, and our world is the Gevura world. So why is it the Chesed world? The Chesed world is where it's expressiveness of light, whereas our world is the Gevura world where light is held back. And he actually says there that there were some souls that belonged in that world that came down into this world and retained that the previous life. And the one he mentions is Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. It says about Moshe that Minamai Mishitiyu, that he was drawn from the water. The name Moshe means he was drawn from the water. Water is associated with Chesed, fire with Gevura. And so Moshe's soul was drawn from the water, from the world of Chesed, which is the world of Tohu, the world that preceded our world, the world of Tikkun of Gevura. And that's why Moshe was on such a high level. It's also why he couldn't speak. It says about Moshe, he had a speech impediment. He couldn't speak clearly. And in the Kabbalists say that is because he was from a higher source, a source so high that he couldn't express himself down in this world, like the lights of Tohu that don't have a keli, don't have a vessel. So yeah, certainly it is connected. Another question: if it's obvious that someone's neshama is more Tohu than Tikkun, naturally, I born with Kabbalistically, how do you instill more Tikkun into that neshama in this world? Okay, so like all ingrained or natural traits, we have to work with them as well as challenge ourselves to go beyond them. So in other words, each one of us have certain persona, a certain personality, whether that is genetic or learned or the source of our soul, but that's just how we are. So to some extent we can change it, and to some extent we can't. So you have to go with the Tohu, but you have to try and take on the Tikkun. So some of it will come naturally, and some of it will be more learned behavior. So a Tohu, a wild person, if you're aware of that, that's already great. Being aware of it is number one. So then you need to say, okay, I need to put into place certain Tikkun practices. I'm not a Tikkun person, but I need to put into place certain practices. I can't live a life totally disorganized. It's a total chaos. I can't do that. So I have to use technology. I need to get a calendar with reminders on it that remind me of things to do. I need to get somebody else to send me reminders sometimes, because it's not my nature to do it. I need to be somewhat organized. And habit does become somewhat ingrained. So Tikkun habits can help a Tohu person at least function in the world. And so that is that is a general answer to that. Sam, you have your hand up. You want to unmute yourself and ask a question? If you'd like to, you can. Otherwise, we'll continue with questions, and we'll come back to you if you want to unmute yourself. Another question here: do Tohu and Tikkun at all correlate to masculine and feminine polarities? So I wasn't sure if I wanted to get into that or not, but certainly yes. Certainly, the world of Tohu is Kabbalistically also called the world of circles, whereas the world of Tikkun is the world of lines. And circular energy is feminine, linear energy is masculine. And so the Tohu, raw emotion energy, is more feminine, and the Tikkun, more organized, rational energy, is more masculine. How that translates into men and women in here, of course, each one of us have both masculine and feminine energies towards us, within us. But yeah, there is definitely a line circle contrast going on with the Tohu versus Tikkun. Now, another question: when the twins were born, why did they name him Esau and he named him Jacob? It does say that in the Torah. I can't remember. There is commentaries on it, but I can't remember what they say right now. I can have a look. Do Jacob's descendants have more Tikkun and Esau's more Tohu? So yeah, there is an idea that the Jacob's descendants, which is the Jewish people, our mission is to bring Tikkun, which is the purpose into the universe. Esau's descendants are usually identified as the Roman Empire, which was brute force and strength. In some ways, they had organization, but as far as purpose to the world, that is the inheritance of Jacob. So is it problematic to believe that the shattering of the vessels was a mistake? Could the divine have still been in development energetically like a child? So no divine move can be a mistake. Everything God does is intentional and exactly supposed to be that way. What God was doing was introducing the ability to make a mistake and then correct it. If God didn't create that possibility, then we couldn't do that. We can't invent fixing. God had to invent fixing. But to do that, he had to do something that was deemed a mistake, a collision. And so it shouldn't trouble us to say that it wasn't a mistake. This was an intentional mistake, and the source, therefore, of all other mistakes. The question here, wasn't Moshe's speech issue resolved in Matan Torah? Weren't all issues, medical problems fixed? Yes, correct. At the beginning of the Torah, Moses' speech was fixed because there was the physical inability to speak was fixed at the giving of the Torah. However, the spiritual source of it was that until the giving of the Torah, his mouth was not able to express the world of Tohu, the soul. At the giving of the Torah, that was the marriage of heaven and earth, where for the first time the lights of Tohu would be able to be expressed in Tikkun, which is the ultimate purpose of the Torah. And so Moses' speech was fixed. He was able to speak. He did not have a speech impediment after the Torah was given, because his Tohu energies now could start to be expressed in the world, which is the ultimate purpose of the Torah. Okay. There's another question here. Are Tohu and Tikkun part of the character of the divine? Is God more Tohu or Tikkun? Is God's wrath Tohu and mercy Tikkun? So any personality that we give to God is what he took on. It's not his essence. God's essence is not definable and cannot be described in any terms. However, out of love for us, which is also metaphorical, but because he wants to relate to us, so he takes on personality traits, and we are in his image. So the Tohu and Tikkun energies come from God, and they are expressions of him. Can we say that God's wrath will, the fallen state of the world comes from Tohu, and so we could say that when we do not live in the Tikkun way, which means in a way according to the divine will, so then we invite the Tohu energy into the world, which is the chaos into the world. So in that way, you could say that God's wrath, as it were, is brought into the world through our Tohu behavior that doesn't have the Tikkun self-control. And final question here is Tohu heaven? No. It's the heaven, what we refer to as heaven. Well, there's a few different meanings of the word heaven. It could mean very generally the spiritual realms, and in that way, yeah, Tohu and Tikkun, they're all the spiritual realms. It's all a description of various spiritual realms. If we mean heaven as far as the abode of souls, where souls go before they come down to this world and after they leave this world, so then no, they don't inhabit the world of Tohu. The Garden of Eden, Gan Eden is Tikkun, is a part of Tikkun. The world of Atzilut is part of Tikkun. Tohu preceded, is higher than those worlds in its energy, but it's not heaven where the souls go to. And if anything, Tohu is down here and in here, inside of us. And so our challenge is to channel our Tohu into the direction of Tikkun. All right, we'll call it a night. Thank you very much for joining, and please go next week. We'll continue with more mind-blowing Kabbalah. Thanks for being here.